The Barrel House is brought to you by you, the listener, and those of you who have chosen to support the show over at patreon.com/barrelhouse, especially our Whiskey Legend tier patrons, Greg, Katie, Lauren, and Joe. Without you, the show wouldn't be possible. Hello, and welcome to the Barrel House. Hello and welcome back to the Barrel House. I am your host, Joe Kane, and today we're going to dig into a topic I get asked about a lot, a real lot. We're talking proof, ABV, alcohol percent, the big question, can you be a real whiskey person if you don't like it hot? I mean, who doesn't like it hot, right? But we're going to get into some tips and tricks really to bring the heat, all of it. But before it gets too steamy in here, I have to do my due diligence. The Barrel House is completely and totally listener supported. That means for as little as $1 a month, you can keep the lights on and the show totally ad-free at patreon.com/barrelhouse. If you want for a little bit more, you can get yourself a couple other perks, so exclusive content, direct influence over the show, using that value for value model over at patreon.com/barrelhouse. Go ahead, be my boss. You know you want to. As always, like at the top of the show, I have to thank our Whiskey Legend tier patrons, Greg, Katie, Lauren, and Joe, for carrying way more than their fair share of the load here. Wouldn't be possible without them or you or any of it. So let's get on to it. So proof. So I'm pairing this episode with a bottle of Jack Daniels. It's a store pick from a liquor store nearby here. And it's a Jack Daniels single barrel proof. It's the highest proof I have here for a whiskey. This one comes in at 133.7 proof. And it's hot, right? This is no joke. You feel it on the front of the palate, you feel it on the back of the palate, you feel it in your chest, and it lingers in your stomach for a minute once it's down, right? It is not an easy drink. And this bottle would turn a lot of people off. I'll be honest, there's times this bottle's too hot for me. This is not my first whiskey of the day kind of bottle. This is hot. This thing is no joke, right? You can feel it. I need to be in the mood for it. But what does that mean for me or for you if you don't like it, if it's too much for you? Are you not a whiskey person? A lot of people tend to get like really hung up on the quality of whiskey being measured by being easy to drink, or that infamous word, smooth. You also hear mellow maybe, right? Maybe people associate that with sweet. They want a sweet whiskey. Whatever it may be. Whiskey fanatics, like most of us, tend to value the idea of like an aggressive, flavorful, high proof, high density, kind of in your face whiskey. But which one is right? Is there a right answer? Can you be a whiskey person if you top out around 90 proof or maybe even lower, maybe 80 proof? I work with this guy. He's very interested in the hobby. He's new to it, but he's really into it and he's really putting himself out there. He asks me a lot of questions. He reads a lot of articles online. He's out there trying a lot, finding what his palate likes. He wants to get into higher proofs for sure. He asks a lot about that and how to do it. But he really struggles with it. He gets up around like 90-ish, 95, and it starts to become difficult. As he gets further into it, 100, 105, 110. I mean, we're not even close to the 133 of this. He really has a hard time. He struggles with it. He doesn't like it. Does that mean he's not a whiskey fanatic like us? I mean, he comes to me with some like new bottles he's been wanting to try or been reading about or just bought or is actively on the hunt for almost every week. Outside of proof tolerance, he's every bit as interested as any of us, more than most of you, more than most of us are interested. He knows quite a bit. He's learning. He's taking all the steps. I don't think it's fair to say that his proof tolerance affects how much of a whiskey person he is. I think the narrative around proof, other than things like, it's not just proof. I think the narrative around proof and a bunch of things with whiskey, for example, like putting ice in your glass, right? It's really elitist. It's not my style. So, sure, to be clear, I've made it abundantly clear that I'm not a fan of most any flavored whiskey. I don't particularly care for it on the rocks unless it's really hot out and I just can't stomach the proof in the heat. But I don't fault you if you do. I have plenty of friends who only drink it on the rocks or only like flavored sweet whiskeys. That's fine, whatever you like. To each his own. What I will say is proof does offer some new things to whiskey, or some tangible things to whiskey. To lower the proof of a whiskey, they actively water it down, right? Like, if you weren't aware, whiskey doesn't come off the still at 80 proof. They don't barrel it at 80 proof, right? There are multiple ways and points within the process for this to occur, but they really are just watering it down. Sometimes it'll be a fast watering down, right? It'll be a thing where they just mix them. And there's, I don't know about controversy, but there's some discussion about what that does to the flavor, as opposed to some places will drip water into it over time to lower the proof, slowly lowering the proof. The speed at which, the temperature of which the water, whether you water it down right off the still or after aging. I mean, there are plenty of points to do this, and they all do different things, but at the end of the day, it is just watered down. What this means is everything is a little diluted. It's not just the alcohol percent. The flavors aren't necessarily as strong. Some of them may change significantly. Some new flavors might get brought to the surface that were buried by all of the heavy flavors that the higher proof was carrying. Some cask strength whiskeys are just too strong and it's hard to taste anything other than the ethanol and one or two notes, and a little water can really open some of them up wonderfully and transform them into a whole new experience, a much more vibrant pour. They'll open up that flavor profile. Other whiskeys, they lower the proof. You've all had these, I'm sure, where you get into it and it just tastes boring and flat. It's very generic. It's just like one note just kind of rolls through your mouth. It's nothing. And that's, the proof is lowered too low or too much or too quickly or whatever it may be. It really is it depends on the whiskey kind of a thing here. And that's a hard thing to tangibly put into place when you're talking about proof, but there isn't a hard rule. It depends on the whiskey. And I think we get hung up too much on like well, I drink my whiskey at 130 proof or higher or whatever it may be. Sure, I'm a real whore for high proof whiskeys. I like that aggressive hit on my palate. I just love the way I like that little bit of hurt that goes a long way for me. I like that, but that does not mean that someone who doesn't is more or less of a whiskey fan. The guy I work with really loves his like 90-ish proof bourbons and Spaysides, sweeter, more pronounced fruity floral notes, a lot of vanilla and butterscotch and those things. It's easier to sit with a taller pour of those. It's easier to handle the exploration and to dig into, and you can have some and not get totally obliterated in like a half an hour's time with them, right? So it's a great place to be at with a whiskey. If you find your lane, this is the thing that it gets me so much, is people get so hung up on whether or not they're allowed to have ice or whether or not they're allowed to drink lower proof or whatever and still be considered actively part of the hobby or the scene. If you find your lane, if you find what you really like, dig in, go that direction. Sure, it's nice to step outside the comfort zone a little bit and try new things, but don't force yourself unless it's really important to you. To steal a phrase, many of you are probably aware of the massive YouTube channel that totally and completely dwarfs my not even moderate following here, the Whiskey Tribe. And their like little motto is drink the whiskey you like the way you like to drink it. And that's all that matters. If you are happy with Fireball on the rocks and you are not drinking yourself to death or hurting anybody in your life with your drinking, ride on, do your thing, enjoy it. Your life's too short to get hung up on whether or not you're allowed to have cinnamon and sugar in your whiskey. Do it. If getting to that real high proof, a guy I work with, he wants to try doing some blends and stuff on his spare time, and he wants to really be able to pull the notes apart and all that stuff to do that. If getting into whiskey at that level is important to you, sure, you're going to need to acclimate yourself to proof a little bit. You're going to need to learn to pull flavors out and understand how those flavors are going to mesh with each other and how the proofs are going to mesh with each other, all that. And if getting into that area is really important to you, there are a bunch of things you can try. There's lots of little tricks and tips that I've seen over the years online and in books and stuff. To me, the only real way is to tough it out. Sure, you can do things like slowly increase the proof of the whiskey that you're drinking. Start with an 85 proof, work your way up to a 90 proof, then find a 98 proof, then 100 proof. And just work your way through those bottles, over a number of years until you're just used to it. I ain't got time for that. I just don't have time for that. Some people say to work your way up in a night, right? This can help for sure. If you're gonna have, like I said, for me, this 133.7 proof whiskey I'm having right now, not pleasurable if it's my first whiskey of the day. It's just too much of a difference. So maybe you have a starter whiskey for the night. You jump off with something around 90, 95 and work your way in. That helps. But at the end of the day, the thing that works for me is you just buy yourself a bottle like this Jack Daniels or something in that range and be a little masochistic like me and just go straight into it. Buy this and only drink this until it's gone. If you still need to work on it, buy another one and only drink it till it's gone. I'm not saying chug it in a night, but I'm saying if this is going to be your whiskey for a month, have this be your whiskey for a month, and just immersion therapy. Just work your way through it until you don't feel anymore. And doesn't that sound great, just not feeling anymore? Wouldn't that just be the best? I'll tell you, once you get past the blazing inferno and real Tennessee whiskey has a hollow note to me. I don't know how better to put it. It feels like a shell. Once you get past all that, there's this thing is a delicious brown sugar peanut thing going on here that I wouldn't get the density of or the richness of if I couldn't handle this proof. So it works for me. This works for me. So, that's kind of where we're at, right? So we're talking proof. It's not as important as people want to make you believe it is. If you want the aggression, if you want the flavor profile, if you want the density, if you want to feel the heat, go for it. If not, there is nothing wrong with a nice 85, 90 proof Speyside that tastes like butterscotch and berries. How good does that sound? If that's your lane, do it. I kind of feel like proof lives in the same space as peated whiskey, where people who love it, like me, and I'm in both of these camps, so I'm a terrible hypocrite, but people who love it will swear that the high proof stuff is the best or the super smoky stuff is the best. And if you're not into high proof or smoke, both of those are going to be brutally uncomfortable for you to drink. That's the way it is. You might come around to them, you probably will if you give them enough time, but you don't need to make it a mission to have that be a thing. Unless you want to. Unless it's your deep inner urge is for that to happen. That's all I really have on proof. If you have any more questions, comments, concerns, if you want to talk about your experience getting through proof or ask for advice or some good whiskeys to start getting proof off with besides this total face obliterator that I have here in front of me, you can send them in to me at barrelhousepodcast@gmail.com. You can hit me up on the Discord at earglemedia.com/Discord. Please rate and review the show on iTunes. It means a lot. You can get your social media links and live stream schedule, all of that at barrelhousepodcast.com. I also keep all that stuff pretty well updated on Instagram. And of course, As always,
don't forget to smash that subscribe button and follow me on Patreon.
You can get me and Deadpool over at patreon.com/barrelhouse. Your support means a lot. Whether you are able to support me there or not, even just following the show, subscribing either the podcast or on YouTube means a lot. It helps a lot, helps the show grow, and I am honored to be able to do this for you. So tell everybody you know about it and take care. Until next time, drink whiskey, be merry, and take care. The Barrel House is written, produced, and hosted by Joe Kane, and it's a proud member of the Earglue Media Network. Views and opinions expressed on this show belong only to the mouth they came out of, and as always, please remember to drink responsibly. Slanjava.